Right now, Canada has just made a decision that, on the surface, looks like a standard infrastructure approval. But in reality, it could reshape how the country positions itself economically and geopolitically for decades to come. On April 24, 2026, under Prime Minister Mark Carney, the federal government officially approved the Sunrise Expansion Program, a $4 billion expansion of Enbridge's West Coast natural gas pipeline system in British Columbia. And if you read that headline quickly, it sounds simple. A pipeline gets expanded. Some jobs are created. A major energy company moves forward with a project, but that interpretation misses the real story entirely, because this isn't just about a pipeline. This is about power, about leverage, about what happens when a country decides it can no longer afford to depend on a single customer and begins piece by piece to build its way out of that dependency. And to understand why this matters, you need to zoom out, because what Canada approved this week is not just steel in the ground, it's strategy. The Sunrise expansion will add roughly 300 million cubic feet per day of additional natural gas capacity to British Columbia's pipeline network, specifically through Enbridge's West Coast system, which already transports gas from northeastern BC and parts of Alberta down toward the coast and the US border. In practical terms, that's about an 8 to 9% increase in overall throughput, and closer to a 17% boost along the southern segment of the system. It's not revolutionary engineering. The project involves about 140 kilometers of additional pipeline built mostly through looping segments that run parallel to existing lines, along with upgraded compression facilities and modifications to infrastructure that's already in place. Construction is expected to begin in mid-2026, with operations targeted for late 2028. So no, this is not a moonshot. Even energy analysts have been clear about that. Some have described the $4 billion investment as table stakes, not transformative on its own, but politically achievable, especially because it involves natural gas instead of oil, and because British Columbia has not mounted significant opposition. But that's exactly the point. The importance of this project is not what it does by itself, it's what it unlocks, because this pipeline is not the end goal. It's the foundation of something much bigger. To understand that, you need to look at one number, a number that defines Canada's entire energy economy: 100%. That's how much of Canada's natural gas exports currently go to a single customer. The United States, not most, not a majority, all of it. In any business context, that would be considered extreme risk. In a geopolitical context, it's something else entirely. It's vulnerability, because when one country controls access to your only export market, it doesn't just have influence, it has leverage. And in recent years, the United States has shown it is more than willing to use that leverage. Tariffs have been imposed. Trade threats have been made. Market access has become a negotiating tool. This is no longer a purely cooperative relationship. It's a transactional one. And Canada's energy infrastructure, built over decades to move resources south, has effectively locked the country into that relationship. Pipelines run to the US refineries are aligned with US demand. Export capacity toward global markets, especially Asia, has been limited. The Sunrise expansion is one step toward changing that, because if more gas can move west, toward the Pacific, it can be liquefied, loaded onto tankers and shipped elsewhere: Japan, South Korea, China, Southeast Asia. And here's the key insight. It's not just about actually selling gas to those markets, it's about having the option too. Because leverage doesn't come from what you do, it comes from what you can do. If Canada has only one buyer, it has no negotiating power. If it has multiple, everything changes, and timing matters here more than ever. Because the global energy landscape in 2026 is not stable, it's shifting. When tensions in the Middle East escalated, and the Strait of Hormuz, one of the most critical shipping routes in the world, was effectively shut down, even temporarily, it exposed something the entire global economy depends on: fragility. Roughly 20% of the world's oil passes through that narrow corridor. Major economies, China, India, Japan, South Korea, rely heavily on it. And when that flow is disrupted, even briefly, the consequences are immediate. Prices surge, shipping halts, insurance costs spike, and suddenly, reliability becomes more valuable than price. That's where Canada enters the picture in a completely different way. Because unlike the Persian Gulf, Canada's Pacific export routes avoid nearly all of the world's major maritime choke points. No Strait of Hormuz, no Strait of Malacca, no heavily contested waters. From a geopolitical risk perspective, that's incredibly valuable. And for buyers in Asia, that value is becoming increasingly clear. Canadian LNG is no longer just fuel. It's insurance against instability, against conflict, against disruption. And buyers are willing to pay for that. Now layer in what's already being built. LNG Canada in Kitimat began shipping in 2025. Phase 1 alone produces 14 million tons annually. Additional projects like wood fiber, LNG, and potential Phase 2 expansions could push Canada's Pacific export capacity beyond 40 million tons per year in the next decade. But none of that works without supply, and supply depends on pipelines, which brings us back to Sunrise. Because without that added capacity, none of these export ambitions can scale. The pipeline feeds the terminals feed the ships feed the markets, and the markets create leverage. Now, there's another layer here that makes this project different from the pipeline battles of the past. Ownership. For decades, major energy projects in Canada faced opposition, particularly from Indigenous communities, often leading to legal challenges and delays. This time, the structure is different. Indigenous groups are not just stakeholders, they are partners. Through agreements and equity ownership, dozens of First Nations are directly involved in the project, with financial participation and long-term interest in its success. That changes the political dynamic entirely. Because when communities have ownership, the conversation shifts. It becomes less about opposition and more about participation. And that may be one of the most important long-term developments in how infrastructure gets built in Canada moving forward. But none of this comes without risk. Environmental groups have strongly opposed the expansion, arguing that it locks in decades of fossil fuel infrastructure and undermines climate commitments. And they're not wrong to raise that concern. There is a real tension here. Canada wants to be seen as a climate leader, while simultaneously expanding natural gas infrastructure. Those two goals don't align perfectly. There's also market risk. Global LNG supply is expected to increase significantly over the next decade. If too much supply comes online at once, prices could fall, and projects with long construction timelines could enter the market at the wrong moment. These are real challenges. But here's what's changed: geopolitics. Because in a world where supply chains can be disrupted overnight, where trade relationships are shifting, and where energy security is becoming a priority again, reliability carries a premium, and Canada offers something few others can: stability, rule of law, secure transport routes, and now growing export capacity. So when you step back and look at the full picture, the pipeline, the LNG terminals, the trade deals, the geopolitical shifts, the tensions with the United States, the push toward diversification, what you're seeing is not just an infrastructure project. You're seeing a country repositioning itself. For decades, Canada built an energy system designed for one customer. That system is now being tested. And slowly, deliberately, Canada is starting to build something different, not overnight. Not without controversy, but step by step, pipeline by pipeline, decision by decision. The Sunrise expansion is not the headline moment, it's the groundwork. Because infrastructure like this doesn't just shape the next few years, it shapes decades. The routes you build today determine where your energy flows tomorrow, and where your energy flows determines your influence. In a world where supply chains can break, alliances can shift, and economic pressure can be applied overnight, having options is no longer a luxury, it's survival. And this week Canada made it clear. It wants more of them.